All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Tyler Welsh, and I'm excited to have everybody joining us for today's webinar. Today's title is Project Management in the Hybrid Workplace. I'd like to turn things over to our speaker, Phil Simon, who is an alumnus from the class of 1994. He's a frequent keynote speaker, recognized collaboration and technology authority, and college professor for hire. He's done many great things. We're excited to have Phil here today. He also hosts his own podcast. He's the award-winning author of many books. But with that being said, I'll give some virtual jazz hands and welcome today's speaker.
Thank you for joining me, everyone. Again, my name is Phil Simon, and I went to Carnegie Mellon a million years ago. And today I'm going to talk about my most recent book, Project Management in the Hybrid Workplace. So, world of work, where are we now? Here's some research from the Slack Future Forum that 3 in 4 workers would like to have control over where they work. But to me, the more interesting stat is that almost 95% of people want control over when they work. And that makes sense, right? The Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 workday is a construct, right? Where is that written? Why couldn't you work in multiple shifts? Why couldn't you take a nap during lunch or go for a walk or shoot basketball or golf or take care of a loved one, pick your kid up from soccer practice? But employees have never been all that engaged while on the clock before COVID and possibly after. But again, don't believe me. One of my favorite quotes is from the total quality management expert, W. Edwards Deming, "In God we trust, all others must bring data." I'd argue that pre-COVID, our work lives were at the center and our personal lives revolved around that. Well, now that we've had some time to adjust, many of us want to continue to have our work lives revolve around our personal lives. There isn't necessarily a playbook for hybrid work. How does it shake out, right? What are the rules in a company for one department or one manager versus another, right? I would argue that certain positions are more capable of being performed in a remote capacity. If you, for example, process insurance claims or process payroll or take call center, work in a call center, taking calls from customers, you can pretty much do that anywhere. But project work tends to be more challenging. And in fact, it always has been, because there are things that we need to decide in a group in a synchronous fashion. We want to trust our colleagues who are forcing us to change our business. I asked basically the same question, right? Which ones are harder, physical or remote projects or hybrid ones? And here were the results. About the same was 47%. The order is a little bit different, but the data is pretty consistent here. So for some, I specifically want to pick pre-pandemic, because I would argue that if we tapped our colleagues on the shoulder to ask a question, they could answer it in real time. It's not as easy to do if you're working in a remote or hybrid capacity, because your colleague could be really anywhere at any time. Hertz management decided that its website and its mobile app needed to be rewritten from scratch. And they had a pretty big budget for it, around $32 million. They hired, the Hertz executives, Accenture. Now, in terms of brand recognition and cachet, it's hard to imagine a worse choice, right? So with no other information, you think that that project would go well. So again, this is a project in 2016. We didn't have to worry about COVID. In theory, we could still work remote, but it wasn't uncommon to be on site 4 or 5 days as a consultant. I've never worked for Accenture, but I've spent plenty of time working as a consultant, and it wasn't uncommon to be on site 4 days a week. So that's a big company, $32 million, Hertz and Accenture, right? What if it's a smaller project? Long story short, a company hired a bunch of people to build a prototype of a website, and the team built the website. In fact, they delivered twice as much functionality as the contract called for. They came in 40% under budget, and the client was absolutely ecstatic with the result. But what are some of the challenges on remote or hybrid projects? Why can they be more problematic than their synchronous in-person counterparts? But I would argue in the book that there are reasons. So things are asynchronous, right? I can't just tap Tyler on the shoulder and say, "Hey, Tyler, you got a minute here? I didn't understand what you said in the meeting," right? We have to sync up with people. We have to get on their calendar. We send them an email or a message in Microsoft Teams or Slack, or we use a Calendly link to schedule time with them. So there are all sorts of logistical challenges. If companies are going to downsize their real estate footprint and save money, which a lot of them are doing, where do we meet? Do we have the space for it? What if everybody comes in on the same day? How do we coordinate all that? Also, tech troubles. Before the podcast, Tyler and I were speaking about companies that use too many tools. If an organization uses Smartsheet, what if IT bans other tools like Notion? And then there are plain old human factors, and this takes me back to my Carnegie Mellon days, lots of reasons that we as human beings contribute to the problem. Let's start off with optimism bias, right? So we expect on these projects that things are going to go really well. And this is true, generally speaking, whether it's hybrid or remote. When in reality, there are a lot more issues that get in the way. But go back to what I said before for a minute, right? We like working from home or working from anywhere. So we want these things to work out. We don't want to give up the flexibility that we fought so long to achieve. So we've got optimism bias. Next up, we've got the halo effect. And just before I get into work, we attribute or ascribe qualities to people whom we like, right? So if he's handsome, and sure, Tyler, go for it, I assume that you're fun and you're smart and you're friendly, right? What does this have to do with remote or hybrid work? How do we manage people effectively? How can we gauge their performance if we don't see them? So these are just some of the problems that I cover in the book, and I want to move now on to solutions. How can we overcome them, right? Well, what if Hertz and Accenture had done a pre-mortem? If we're working asynchronously and we're sending a lot of text messages, and data from Microsoft indicates that, I want to say during the pandemic, that something like the number of messages sent in Teams went up by 62% because we were working asynchronously. What if people actually wrote well, right? Writing workshops. If you think that's insane, this man would disagree. This is Bill Carr. He used to work with a little guy by the name of Jeff Bezos. He was on his S team at Amazon.
Before we get into our next question, we do have something from Allison. Just wondering if you could just rehash the 5 suggestions real quick, Phil.
Yeah. Pilots, postmortems, writing seminars, agreeing on the tools, and team level agreements. Boom! From memory.
Nice.